Welcome to Deciphering Heat, because for us, the podcast is the juice. It's been a long time coming to do this movie on the Decipher Hacker Movie Podcast. I'm really happy to have Meg Gardiner back on. Meg is the co-author of Heat 2, which you can see right behind me, and I think and right behind Meg too. And Casey Ellis, the CTO and co-founder of Bugcrowd, who I know is a huge fan of this movie as well. So thank you both for coming on. I'm really excited to do this.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. Casey, when I reached out to you about this, I knew you were a big fan of the movie, and it's not exactly a hacker movie, but there's a lot of stuff in, there's Kelso. We're going to get to Kelso. I've got a lot of questions about him and a lot of comments too. And, but there's a whole bunch of like social engineering that goes on in here. There's a whole bunch of, I feel like I was watching it yesterday, as I told Meg, with Michael Mann's director's commentary on, and he sort of talks about the way that Neil's crew plots things in the way that Hannah's group reacts to their plots. And it reminded me a lot of the way that cybercrime groups act, in the way that, forensic investigators act and in law enforcement act. So we got a lot of chances to get into that stuff. But I kind of wanted to start out with asking both of you what your relationship was to the movie when it first came out. Meg, you and I talked about this on the first podcast. But when this came out in 95, were you sort of first in line, first weekend to go see it, or did it sort of like creep up on you?
It crept up on me. At the time, I had 3 little kids at home. Going out to the movies meant maybe seeing The Little Mermaid.
Oh yeah.
So, a 3-hour saga wasn't in the cards, so I saw it first, on video or DVD, and that just blew me away. By the time I saw it, people had been talking about it, and it was kind of like, what's your favorite Michael Mann movie? What's your favorite crime movie? And I'm like, okay, I better see this. And
yeah,
it took me quite a while to get up off the floor afterwards.
What about you,
Yeah,
Casey?
yeah. For me, similar. I didn't see it in the theater. From memory, I actually had a skateboarding accident and was laid up for a chunk of time. And Heat was one of the movies that I watched kind of to pass the time through that period. And just watching it for the first time, like getting completely immersed in the story, like relating with the characters, kind of getting taken along for the ride. I probably watched it, a dozen times over, whatever it was, 6 weeks when I was dealing with a broken arm.
Right. Yeah, I remember when this came out, it was, I think, December of 95. And I remember it came out a few weeks after Casino, like maybe 3 or 4 weeks after Casino came out. And I remember there being more hype for Casino and De Niro being in that than there was for Heat. I mean, I knew about Heat, but I wasn't like checking for Michael Mann movies all that much. I was like, oh, there's a De Niro mafia movie coming out. So I went and saw that first. We lived like 2 blocks from a movie theater, and I was like 1 year out of college. I had nothing else to do. And then Heat showed up 3 weeks later. I was like, okay, I'll go see that. And like you, Meg, I walked out. I was like, oh my God, I think that's the greatest movie I've ever seen. That was almost 30 years ago. And I think it's the movie I've seen the most. And I think at this point, it's probably my favorite movie. Yeah.
Good choice.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all agree. It's certainly my favorite crime movie. I was re-listening to the podcast you and I did a couple years ago, Meg, and you said you would fight somebody who said this wasn't the best crime movie ever made. I mean, best and favorite to me are two different things. Like for me, it's my favorite. I don't know that I could say best. I'm not a film critic, but
you challenging me to a fight?
Yeah, absolutely not. No,
it's
you're
on.
a Texan. I'm not messing with you. No, but to me, it's the best, and it's also my favorite. There's others I mean, his, I guess, not prequel to this, but Thief has a lot of the same elements. You can sort of see him practicing the things that he did in Heat in Thief. James Caan's character shares a lot of similarities with Neil's character in Heat. Just the precision, sort of excluding everything else from their lives. And then, things go sideways when they bring something else into their lives. So he certainly spent a lot of time plotting and writing this movie.
Oh yeah, and it's all about the characters.
Yeah,
the characters are who they are, what
Yeah.
drives them, all the way down to the core. You've got to keep digging and digging and digging to really figure them out. And that's one reason the movie never gets old. You watch it again and you discover something new. It never feels stale. It never feels like it's slowing down because you've seen it before. You're just still always learning and enjoying and anticipating what's coming next.
And to me, it's always like every time I watched it again over the weekend as well. And it's the same. It's the same experience I've always had watching it. There's always these new kind of details that pop out too. There's such a for a movie to go that long, be that compelling and kind of immersive in that sense, but then have so much texture and detail to it.
Right.
That's something that I've really loved about it. And to me, I went through at one point and kind of, okay, what are my top five? And I realized they were mostly crime
Yeah.
movies with like crazy character development. Um, the only other one I would say that comes close from a favorite standpoint is probably The Usual Suspects. But then kind of
Mhm.
comparing that with Heat, Heat's realism and just kind of the cat and mouse nature of the story and how realistic they make that, the personal sacrifice, the personal side of things. There's just so much in there.
Mhm.
I love it for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as you said, Meg, the characters are what really draw me in. Obviously, the action. I mean, that the opening set piece is incredible. Every time you watch that,
Yeah.
I turn the volume up as loud as possible. I warn my wife and my kids. I'm like, I'm about to put on Heat. You guys might want to go outside or whatever. But that opening sequence where you really have no idea what these people are doing, you're sort of dropped into their lives, at various points in this one day. You see Neil wandering off the MTA through a hospital, stealing an ambulance. You don't know that he's stealing it right away. You think maybe he's a paramedic. We don't know, except you notice him opening the door with his elbow and that kind of stuff. And then you see Chris buying, we don't really know what it is. Turns out,
Explosives.
yeah, it
The
turns
shape
out to be
charges,
shape
yeah.
charges. Yep. And just all these little things. And then until you see the communications among the guys as they're setting up the armored car robbery, you realize, holy shit, these guys are really, really good at what they do. They've been planning this for a long time. They're extremely precise. They work together all the time, as Michael says to Waingro. And but then from there, you see the strands of their characters. You get a sense of their personalities right away. They're not just four thugs. They have disparate personalities. So for you, Meg, like, which is there a specific character that you glom onto, outside of maybe Neil and Vincent, who, we can argue about who wins the movie or whatever, but is there somebody else that really you always sort of find yourself drawn to in the movie?
Chris and Charlene, I think. The first time you watch it, you think, "Oh, Chris is Neil's lieutenant. He's laconic. Has an explosive temper." Um, then you kind of watch, and you watch everything that Val Kilmer does in that performance. It's so subtle. He's not just jumping around screaming and doing crazy things.
Right.
There's like just the smallest looks he gives, and you realize that Chris is on the job. He is a total professional. He is committed. He has rehearsed. He has studied. He has he is is committed to the job. It's only when he finishes the job that the rest of his life he messes up in. He's got to pay off the bookies because the Super Bowl wiped him out. His
Yeah.
wife isn't happy about that. Again, as he said, why Neil says, what's wrong? And he says, not enough steaks in the freezer, which also tells you the economy and pithiness of Michael Mann's dialogue, because that,
Yeah.
that explains their home life in one vivid sentence. And Charlene, to see that she's tough.
Hmm.
She is tough, and in the movie we don't know that much about her background or how she ended up with Chris, and we see that they've got this beautiful kid. They're hot for each other.
Yeah.
Their marriage is messed up, and she's seeing somebody on the side, and she's ready to bolt because Chris is just screwing up, but she can't help herself. She loves this guy, as she proves at the very end.
Yeah, Chris was the one for me too. Even right from the beginning, the first time I saw the movie, I was always a big Val Kilmer fan. Like, he's in a few of my Real Genius is one of my favorite movies, completely
Mhm.
different, but he's great in that movie. And it struck me watching it again yesterday that Charlene is one of the few adults in this in this group of people, you know, as
Yeah,
you know,
that's a good way to
she
put
yeah,
it.
she and Kim Stanton's character, who I forget,
Oh my gosh, Kim Stanton. Yeah.
incredible, Breeden's wife,
Right.
who is only there for a few precious scenes, but even in those, just the scene in the bar, the scene in the car before he goes into the restaurant for the first
Mhm.
time, where she says
Yeah,
she's proud of him, and
exactly.
all that kind of stuff, and you're just
Mhm.
like, oh my god, okay, this is somebody who's stuck by a guy who's made some mistakes.
Right.
Charlene and Chris are a little different. Like, Chris is a career criminal. Like, this is what
Mhm.
he does. You don't get that sense from, Dennis Haysbert's character. Maybe he is. We don't totally get a chance to see that, but the women are certainly the adults. The men are just off playing cops and robbers, literally.
That's exactly what it is with and it's a deadly game.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's interesting because I was gonna, yeah, I don't want to kind of bandwagon here, but I was gonna say Chris as well, Chris and Charlene in particular, their relationship, because I do think, the whole idea, like for me, the action is the juice. That line, like the different kind of motivations for the different folk in Neil's crew. To me, Chris genuinely does seem to be kind of doing it for family in that sense. Like there is almost this sense of him trying to adult and trying to reconcile adulting with being a career criminal.
Right.
Watching that interplay in the relationship that he's got with Charlene, I found that kind of drawing me in a little bit last night when I watched it. And yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
like he says at the yeah, sorry. Like he says, "I need this, brother." When Neil says, "Are you in or are you out?" He says, "I
yeah,
need."
and the whole, like, when Neil's challenging him, and the whole like idea of like you can't have attachment in your life if you're going to do this type of thing. His response, for me, the sun rises and sets with her.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there's there's definitely that kind of idea of attempting to adult, and kind of being pulled in and really protected by Charlene, in that relationship at the end of the movie, where she does yeah
Mhm.
it's
That's
quite
just,
powerful.
yeah, that part to me. And the first few times you watch the movie, you're like, okay, she just tells him to go away. But it's such, you get that sense that, like, she's sacrificing
There's
everything
a
for
depth to
him.
it, yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
She and Dominic are kind of screwed now. Like, we'll get to that later. But Meg, when you were doing in the writing process for He Too with Michael, I know that he's sort of built up these backstories for all those characters even before he thought of writing the book with you.
Mhm.
He talks about it in the director's commentary. He had biographies for all of these characters, like, sort of built up. What was that like, digging into the backstories that he had already created for the movie itself?
Oh, it was wondrous. I mean, he had written biographies for all the main characters before he scripted the movie, and that was one of the reasons that he wanted to expand the world of Heat,
Yeah.
because the movie takes place in a very narrow stretch of time. It's maybe what, 3 weeks.
Yeah, probably.
And he knew that Chris's mom had been a stripper in Paramount, California in the 70s before ending up in Camarillo State Hospital. He knew that Hannah's dad had uh, fought in World War I and then battled the KKK in Western Illinois. He knew all about how where Hannah had fought with the Marines in Vietnam, and so he wanted to giving me all that information and seeing, like, it was like opening just opening a door into Oz,
Yeah.
and understanding how much more there was that he had already he had given all those biographies, of course, to the actors to help
Yeah.
them inform their performances, and he knew that none of that material was going to make it onto the screen, but it was in there. I mean, Robert De Niro and Al Pacino and Val Kilmer were all working with those biographies embedded in their performance.
And you can tell that preparation comes through in their performances. I mean,
Mm.
De Niro and Pacino and Kilmer too are famously very, process driven actors. And one of the things that sort of struck me again watching it this last time was you can see some of this Pacino specifically, his backstory and in his mannerisms. Mann has talked about how Vincent Hanna probably had a cocaine problem during this movie, but we don't really see it on screen. But you can see it in old scripts and things like that. And I think it's mentioned in the book, if I remember correctly, Meg.
Yes.
Yeah, but that comes across in Pacino's performance. He's manic, but he's also very focused.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said about Chris, when they're on the job, like that nightclub scene where he goes in and he's talking to Tone Loc and Ricky Harris's idiot
Yes.
brother.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And it's 2 a.m, and it's an
yeah,
after hours club down in
right.
Charisma, right?
Yeah, BJ's on Alvarado,
Uh-huh.
which I was very sad to learn didn't really exist. I definitely tried to go there sometime in 2005, but that backstory you can tell absolutely influenced the way that all of these folks,
Right.
performed in the
Yeah,
movie.
and it was in the biography, and it is in the book. This is not a spoiler for the novel, but Hannah joined the Marines and found himself at the Battle of Hue, and he and his fellow Marines were provided with plenty of amphetamines to make sure that they were wide awake
Yeah,
and ready to go. So uh,
yeah.
discovered that.
What I mean, obviously we probably all have our favorite scenes in this movie, apart from the opening sequence and obviously the bank robbery that comes in the middle. Are there any other maybe smaller scenes that stand out to you, Casey, that you really kind of, as you watch it once again, you're like, God, that's so good. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't forget about it because it gives me chills even thinking about it. It's the scene in the diner where Hannah and Neil get together. It's just it's just such an electric performance, and seeing these kind of switches of like empathy, like control of the conversation, all those different things. There's moments all through it. There's this kind of point where they click, and it's like, okay, we actually understand each other far better than we thought we did. We're on the other side of the fence, so to speak.
Yeah.
But we're doing what we do kind of for the same reasons, and there's this empathy and this friendship that kind of happens in that moment. In the midst of both of them being quite lonely as well. So like just seeing all of those kind of interpersonal dynamics and like all of the things that they bring to what they do respectively kind of come together. That to me is one of my favorite scenes because the idea. I mean, this even comes back to some of the stuff that I took from the movie and applied to work. I think empathy with criminals and empathy with the adversary is actually a really powerful thing. You don't want to obviously get sucked up too deep into it, but
Yeah.
in a practical sense, there is this idea that like no, they're people too. They do have their own motivations. They do have their own drive and almost compulsion to be the best at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just criminal in that sense. So yeah, I love that scene.
Yeah.
Right. No, I find that a really fascinating concept that you could apply that scene to your own work. That's really an incredible insight to it. Because and since you mentioned that scene, and since Dennis has on the diner T-shirt there, I will praise that scene as well. It's the first time I think I saw the movie. Probably I thought, well, this is just a quiet moment. This is just giving us a chance to breathe. This is kind of an interlude, and it's not.
No.
And the more you watch it, you realize what's going on. And it wasn't until I really talked with Michael about that scene that you realize one of the reasons both Neil and Hannah agree to this meeting. I mean, when Hannah walks up to Neil's car on the freeway, at first Neil's got his
How you doing?
Yeah.
how you doing? He's got a Colt
He's got his
45 along his side there. He's not sure what's going to happen. How about I buy you a cup of coffee?
Yeah.
And that scene arose out of an actual real life encounter that one of Michael's friends from the Chicago Police Department had with a real life bank robber who was really named Neil McCauley back in the early 60s, when he ran into this guy and thought, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to draw down on each other? Are we going to have a shootout here? And I don't know, the Woolworths or whatever. And instead he said, let's have a cup of coffee. And
Wow.
they talked and kind of knew that this was a once in a lifetime chance to scope each other out. And that's what's going on in the scene. It's not just let's have a conversation. It's not being done to de-escalate anything between them, or to offer Neil a deal or anything. Hannah knows that Macaulay's not gonna go for anything like that.
Yeah.
But even in their supposedly, inconsequential chat, they are trying to learn every single thing they can about each other. Every single thing. I mean, what does Hannah says, "What are you, a monk?" And Neil says, "Oh, I got a woman." And at the end of the movie, what does Hannah see? A car at the scene where he knows Neil is, a car with a woman sitting there waiting for someone.
Yeah, and he sort of, at least I didn't notice that the first few times I see the movie, because it's that big crowd scene at the hotel after he pulls the fire alarm, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. But Hannah clocks her, sees her sitting in the car by herself, like looking around, looking for someone, and he's like, that's her.
That's her.
He's here. He's here somewhere. Right. And that little bit of information that he got from Neil in the diner gave him that advantage, because otherwise he would have just been running around. He would have not had any idea.
Correct. So they're both predators. You mentioned the cat and mouse, and this is a cat and mouse game, but it's it's not predator and prey. It's predator and predator.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, they come away from that meeting with that understanding. It's like that line, I don't know how to do anything else. Neither do I. I don't much want to. Neither do I. Like that line. It's like, okay, well, our fate is kind of sealed at this point.
The rapport there, and just the expressions on the actors' faces.
Yeah. But also the
subtle smiles that they give to each other are so good. There's one where, De Niro, he almost breaks into a full smile, and he just like holds it back. It's so good. It's so good. Yeah. And you're right, Casey. They just recognize each other.
Yeah. But then you see it at the end of it though. So there's all of that, like there's these really kind of lovely, let's get to know you. Okay. There's that empathy moment, and then there's that sort of relating kind of section. And then it switches gears into, okay, well, I'm going to kill you if I have to.
Right.
Yeah.
At the end, like that's sort of the parting moment of it. It's just, it's almost like a movie inside the movie. Like there's, act 1, act 2, act 3. And kind of sets up the back end of the film, where it's like, okay, this is set in motion now. Like they're both obsessive. Neither of them are going to back down. They're both like peak of their game, alpha players.
And they're both fully conscious about who they are.
Yeah.
Extremely self-aware. That's right. And I always got the sense from the movie, and certainly from the book, Meg, that Hannah, I think, realizes that he could have been Neil had he just made a couple of different decisions, because like as it's described in the book, Hannah was not like some angel by any stretch of the imagination.
And his dad got into bootlegging in the 20s, etc. So of course,
and he was driving around the back roads of Illinois with his lights off, going 100 miles an hour. Again, not to spoil the book, that's just a little tidbit that's in there. And I think Michael even says that in the director's commentary, or some version of that, that Hannah had been kind of a thrill seeker, and that's super obvious in the movie. His wife even says, you are what you're going after. Like that's all you are. You're just a shell otherwise,
right?
Which is a brutal thing to hear from your wife, I think. Not what you want, but I love that scene so much, obviously, but the one that I really enjoy too is the first diner scene after the armored car robbery, where everything goes sideways. And there's a few things. One is the part where Tom Sizemore gets up and moves to the counter stool to let Neil McCauley come in and sit down. And then after he sits back in the booth, and Macaulay slams Wayne Greer's head on the table, Sizemore just tilts his head and looks at the guy 2 booths
Yep.
down, and that guy, like, you could just see the life go out of him. He's like,
Nope,
"I'm not.
go back to my pie.
Yep, let me
Gets
look
back
at my
to his paper
paper."
or his
Yeah,
Right.
book or whatever. Yeah.
and I noticed that Sizemore, even as they do the reaction shots to him, he keeps looking at that guy over Macaulay's shoulder for the rest of that scene. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he, there's so many little bits in there. And then when they get out to the parking lot, obviously, and everything goes sideways. And that's the one thing that I'm always like, why didn't De Niro just put his foot on Wayne Grove's chest? Like, well, then you don't have a movie. Like,
Right.
there's, yeah, then there's no story. But
And even the choreography of that, like when Sizemore moves across, Neil comes in, and then sits like just the flanking. The idea, like there's all of these moves, and as they walk out, you see Sizemore and Kilmer kind of peel off to
Exactly.
to
And
go
cover
Neil,
the
around.
sides
and
while
Neil walks out in
Neil's doing the
front,
thing.
which
Yeah.
is meant to disarm Wayne Grove.
Yeah.
Mentally, that if Neil is presenting his back to Wayne Grove's going to think, okay, things are fine. Nobody's going to try to pull anything on me. Yeah.
I think the thing I love about that is just the you don't know, like the movie doesn't go into how much they planned that or if they talked about it specifically, who's going to do what, when, or whatever else. But to me, the impression it gives is just this sense of like operating. There's like a no pass kind of characters, that crew, like they know each other so well, and there's such a familiarity with getting the job done that no words, they just do the thing. Do it incredibly, proficiently. Obviously, that particular move failed, but everything that went into it seemed like it was very well choreographed in a way that didn't really require words. They just knew what to do.
I always wondered, and I don't think Michael's ever talked about it, or he sort of glosses over it in the director's commentary, where the other member of their crew is, like why they had to pick up Wayne Grove. Like what happened to the other guy, or is it they just needed a fifth person because this job required it? So I don't know. Did you ever get a sense of that, Meg?
No, I do think that they needed a fifth man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it was just such a big job, and they needed.
Or no, they needed a fourth man. No, there were five. Sorry.
Yeah.
Trejo was in the pickup truck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For you, Meg, when you were in the writing process and everything, there's not every character from the movie got to be in the book because people got murdered. Was there somebody in the movie, a character in the movie that you were like, gosh, I wish I had gotten a chance to take a swing at some story for that person?
Honestly, Kim Staunton, Breeden's wife, she was, who is this woman? How did she develop this strength? What is going on in her life? She's just such a jewel there that gets as much screen time as the story calls for. But you wonder, where was she from? What life was she going to lead now? So anyway, that I like that. Kind of wonder what's going to happen to Dominic.
Yeah. Dominic's probably had a rough ride as
Well, I think it was, he's with Charlene, and Charlene has some rock solid ideas about how she wants to make sure that he gets off on launches on a better footing than his dad.
Yeah. I wanted to, Casey, ask you specifically about the Kelso character, who's one of my favorites, even before I got into the security world. Meg, I know you love him too. Plays a big part in the book. You'll love it, Casey, whenever you get a chance to read it. But just his, like, he's only in, I think, maybe 2 scenes in the movie total, and it's basically the same scene. They just cut back and forth to it. Him and De Niro up on the, up at his house on this hill with all the aerials and everything. You don't know what the hell's going on up there. Especially in 1995. I had no idea what the hell was going on up there. I was like, what are all those, antennas for or whatever. But you sort of get the sense that this guy is one of the few people that really understands how information moves around at that point in human history and has a grasp on it and where to find it and where to grab it. That strikes me as,
I know how to grab it.
That line. I know how to grab it. It just comes to you. It just flies through the air, which is literally like what we do. What was your impression of him as sort of a proto hacker type.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, just that idea of having the technical prowess, like understanding the nature of flow of communication, like being set up in a way that, allowed him to exploit that, and having this almost omniscient kind of
Yeah.
capability as a result of that. It was cool. Like straight up, it was just cool. There's, I'm trying to think of a more articulate way of framing that, but
No,
seeing that guy,
yeah,
the character, he's this kind of nerdy dude. Um, he's in a wheelchair, I think, as
he
well.
is. Yeah.
So there's not a lot to kind of, as a character, admire necessarily or aspire to, but that ability that he had, and the kind of things that it allowed him to do, there was a coolness factor to that. I think that I got from it first time. He's one of my favorites. Like he's the character that's stuck in my head
Yeah.
as kind of the outlier, beside the De Niro and Pacino's characters after the fact.
He does remind me of some of the like literal graybeard hacker types
Yeah,
that we know,
yeah.
folks that probably worked at DARPA or something along those lines in the 70s, early 80s, which is, we don't know it in the movie, but that is Kelso's backstory, right, Meg? Like that's,
It is. Yes.
All
yeah,
right, there
Yeah.
you go. Yeah, I mean that totally checks out. Like someone coming in from the IC, or from defense, like understanding, it's at the very least he would have been some sort of technical kind of radio operator back in the day, but to hear that he had kind of the defense side of it, that makes a ton
yeah,
of sense. Yeah, and like what he was doing, I mean, back then, a lot of stuff was getting whipped around unencrypted.
hmm,
So the idea of just being able to put antennas up and capture and store and process and actually start to weaponize some of that information, like that checks out from a technical standpoint. Yeah, it's very cool. Like, it's a nice bit of detail there, and then to be able to actually create a plan off the back of that as well, because you think about the
yeah,
amount of information he's able to see and consume, like that's pretty overwhelming, probably. So to be able to actually take what he's getting and say, oh, okay, here's an opportunity that I can see forming out of the
right.
stuff that I'm able to learn. Like, let's put a plan together. Let's figure out who the right people are to get the job done. Yeah, it's kind of neat.
And there would have been a very finite number of people that had that ability in 1995 or 94 as he was, filming this. Very small number of people, and they would have
Yeah,
all been.
yeah. I'm thinking about the crossover between the hacker, because I mean, back then you've got like the BBS
Mhm.
community. You've got folk, in the very early stages of DARPANet and all that kind of stuff. But then you've got like the ham radio like
Yeah,
hacker group, right? There's always been, and it still exists today, I think. You see kind of folks that have joined the hacker community more recently. They see like the DEF CON ham radio group. They're like, what the heck's that? Um, but it does hark back all that way to 95 and even before that.
yeah. Meg, for people that are just listening and not, you rubbed your hands as soon as I mentioned Kelso's
So
name on the. He must have been so much fun for you to write.
Kelso's is a wonderful character. He's indelible in the film. He lives in this house, the Ariel House, which is a real place, and it's still there. If you look on Google Maps, you can you can see the house.
Yeah,
And what's he doing up there? What is? I mean, he's got a house full of of, of computer equipment and
Stuff.
microwave receivers and all kinds of stuff. And so and he's selling bank robbery scores,
yeah,
but he is so serene.
Mm.
Tom Noonan
yes,
plays him so beautifully that he's serene, and he's got this sort of little elfin smile that just kind of lights up his face when he talks about all the alarms in the bank
yeah.
and how you're going to turn them off.
But see, they don't go anywhere.
Yeah,
It's just like
exactly.
waves his hands, like bye bye. Yeah,
So, so but he's a wizard, and he's sort of
Yeah.
mysterious. So, in the book, what can we do? I was desperate to to have him in the book, and he's in both the prequel and the
Yeah.
sequel portions of the novel. And you wanted him to learn a bit about him, but have him maintain his sense of mystery. You don't
Mystique.
need to know. You don't need to know where he went to elementary school. That kind of
No,
thing.
I don't want to know any of that about him. I
No.
just want to know, like, he somehow got there. He's really smart. He knows how to do all this shit, and you don't. So you have to go to him. You know,
Yes.
De Niro and his guys have their skills. He's got
Right.
his skill.
Yep.
Yeah, and in the book, it was fun to actually let Neil and Nate, who was played by John Voight in the film, let them go into Kelso's house, and he takes him into, his server room where he's got it set up as a Faraday cage and everything
Yeah.
like that. So, and Macaulay's kind of like, huh, what's all this stuff? Does it say HBO or just Russian satellite comms? But
Yeah.
And you could tell as well that moment in the film where Macaulay's like, how did you, like, I genuinely don't understand how you got
He had
access to
no
this
idea.
stuff. Like he's like, I don't really know how this stuff works, but there was this point where it's like, you know what, I'm going to decide to trust
right.
your competency, your skills, and the fact that
Mhm.
this is all legit, which
Mhm.
is interesting because there's not really you can't really see a good reason for him to do that other than
He's worked with
looking
him
at the
before.
data and saying,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
They have some sort of backstory because I think,
Right.
Nate says to him, Kelso called, he's putting out a score.
Right.
And Neil says, what do I need his for? I've got my own. I think speaking of that, the precious metals
Mhm.
depository or whatever it is that they end up abandoning. But yeah, he's at least
That's
worked
right.
with them once or twice. You get the impression in the movie. And, once De Niro says, okay, you're on, Kelso says, congratulations, and shakes his hand like he just, got a new job, like
Bought a
did
house
get
or
a new
something.
job. Like, yeah, right. Or just had a baby or something. It's just like, you did it. You're going to get $13 million.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's and to me, like, one of the things that hit me last night again is even probably 5 or 6 years later, if Michael had, not been able to get this picture made, if it had had to move to even 2000, the technology part would have had to change a lot.
Yeah.
Because yes, there are still mainframe computers in banks in 2000, but getting into them and doing what they did and plugging in a new board and that kind of stuff, there would have been a lot of different things that he would have had to deal with, as you did in the book, Meg. But that technology part of it, they hit it right in the sweet spot where this stuff was still possible.
Yeah.
And, you could physically cut into a bank's floor, remove a board and replace it with a malicious one, which, Casey, we've seen like supply chain attacks, not to that extent, but things like that in the last few years with software updates and, certified pre-owned hardware that makes its way into the marketplace. I think Michael Mann was ahead of his time with that.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how a lot of those patterns just kind of repeat themselves with the technology updates in some ways. Even coming back to the cat and mouse piece, the different incentives, the technology side of it, the innovation side of it, which is kind of what we're talking about right now. Like there's certainly versions of basically exactly the same thing that happened today. But yeah, to your point, it was a very ahead of its time kind of early cut on that.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I may be needing to talk to you about what's going on these
Be happy
days
to.
for whatever my next thriller.
Be happy to.
Yeah, Casey can help you out for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I did want to talk about obviously the famous bank robbery, which is, just an incredible set piece, which, I think Michael says in the commentary, he's talked a lot about it over the years. They shot it over the course of several days. Obviously it's in downtown LA at this, the first time I ever went to LA after I saw this movie, I went directly there. My
You
brother-in-law just
did.
moved there. I was like, Ryan, we are going, show me where this is. I want to go to Fifth and Flower. I want to know exactly where this is. I'm just an idiot. But it's such an impressive piece of choreography in not just filmmaking, but also Michael has talked a lot about like the training that all of those guys went through, the military style training for weeks and months ahead of time to get the precision right and all of that kind of thing. And, we do see that sometimes in the hacking community too, Casey, where folks do a ton of reconnaissance and a lot of preparation for an operation. Sometimes things go well, sometimes they don't. And you have to adapt. Sometimes you have to change
Mm.
tactics and all that kind of stuff. And it's one of those things. It's another scene where I see something new every time. I'll notice a person in the background or a car that is doing this, or something that Pacino does, or something that Kilmer does. Just him, as soon as he sees the cop across the street, he doesn't even. There's
No, it's,
no hesitate,
Yeah.
none whatsoever.
mhm. Yeah, and the actors trained, I believe, with the SAS in Southern California for knowing how to choreograph
Yeah.
how to handle the firearms, and as Michael says, with maniacal safety on the
Yeah.
range and on the set, um, to know how to carry out the whole gunfight in the street. And I have a friend, another writer, Matthew Betley, who's a former, he's a Marine Corps officer. And he says that scene is what they show people at officer candidate school to teach them how to conduct a bounding overwatch.
Oh my God.
Wow.
That's incredible.
So, because what Neil's crew is doing when the cops show up is they've been ambushed, and they are now trying to turn the ambush around. And
Right.
what the LAPD is doing is what it's prepared and staffed and trained to do, which is continually bring in more resources, more
Right.
assets, more cars, more weaponry, and till they just overpower these people on the street. And Neil and his crew are they're assaulting the ambush.
Right.
They're moving forward and keeping going and never stopping.
Yeah, even the handoffs, like that scene's phenomenal from a from that standpoint. Like it's I've not heard that in terms of it being used for training, but I'm kind of not surprised
No.
because when you think about the position they're in, they're completely flanked. There's there's far fewer of them than there are kind of folks to get through. And just the level of choreography, like they know that again, they know they have to work together as a team. Even like that point where Sizemore's character gets routed and he has to go around, and then he gets shot by Pacino. You can kind of see that, like, okay, that wasn't part of the plan. Like we had this tactical, set of things that we'd either rehearsed or played out in the past. And they were just very, very good at it. And just watching that, I mean, it's a phenomenal scene. Everyone knows that. It's not necessarily, I know I'm preaching to the choir on that one, but just, the strategy and the tactics that they use, and just how precise that stuff is, and how, like, you can kind of watch it and say, like, think that would actually probably work. You
Right.
see a lot of these shootout scenes where it's like there's this miraculous escape, and
Yeah.
oh, okay, that they got super lucky. Like with this one, it's like, no, they were just really competent and actually executed. Well.
And even amid all the gunfire, you see who these characters are.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You can tell there are subtle, not all subtle, but there are points in time where Pacino, bends down to help an officer who's been wounded and things like that. And he's not firing into crowds of bystanders. No. Kilmer and all the Sizemore, they are shooting not indiscriminately, but they're not worried about who's in the background or who might get hurt.
Their attitude is that, you showed up in the middle of a bank robbery and a gunfight. You'd better get yourself out of here. Even that little detail that they're all like the Macaulay's crew, they're all on full auto. Whereas Pacino's character is semi-auto, like precision.
Right.
Okay, I don't want to. Watch your background.
Watch your background
kind of stuff.
on the way there. That's what he said. Watch your background.
Yeah.
And then to like show the complete opposite side of that, when they're in the grocery store parking lot after Sizemore gets shut off from them, and De Niro is literally just spraying a parking lot crowd. Does not care. To get Kilmer into the car and get out of there, and then Sizemore picks up a little girl as a body shield, like an absolute sociopath, And
exactly, he's been portrayed all through the movie as the good dad. He's buying presents for his kids. He's a loving husband. Yeah, as long as
Michael even says that in the commentary. He's like, Chirito is trying to have this sort of suburban quotidian life.
Mhm.
And meanwhile, he's like, whose kid is this? I don't care. It's not mine.
Right.
You're
The
like,
shield now.
yeah, if you're going to help me get away, sorry. Like, that's just
Mhm.
life.
Right.
And that just, that sort of psychological separation from what you're doing, the deed that you're doing
Mhm.
is absolutely something we see, Casey, in, I know you have, I've spoken to people who were on the wrong side of the cybercrime fence, and they have that ability to
Switch it off.
switch it off, be
Yep.
like, look, this is my job. This is how I make
Yep.
money. And yeah, some people are going to get hurt. Ransomware groups are like this. The perfect example.
Yeah. Yeah. And
People are
and
going to
in
get
that,
run
like,
over in the course of what I do. I'm sorry about it. Or not
well,
really.
yeah, because a part of their goal is survival, right?
Right.
Pretty much at all costs. It's like get the job done, at all costs, but also survive through it in a way that allows you to actually enjoy the spoils of
Yeah.
of what you're doing, and that gets messy. Like you see that, it just when things get really intense, like you said, like Macaulay spraying the parking lot like that, and Sizemore picking up that kid. It's like, okay, these guys have their back to the wall, and they are not in a position, like, they're not going to hesitate. They're not the kind of folk who are going to back down. They're going to, by all
Right.
means necessary, get the job done, get out, survive, be in a position to continue forward, and they'll defend themselves, however, with
Yeah.
whatever is available, really.
Yeah. And Macaulay's willing to die for Chris, and he's willing to die to try to rescue
Yeah.
him.
Then there's that.
That's
Yeah.
they're brothers in arms and brothers emotionally. But
Yeah.
if you were just there to pick up a rotisserie chicken that day at the supermarket,
Sorry.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
and then
does
the and
seem,
and then the vet afterwards as well. It's like, oh, my daughter gave me this T-shirt. It's like, I don't care. It's like,
that kills me every time. Like,
Dr. Bob.
like, I don't give a shit who gave it to you. Take it off. And he's like a veterinarian. He's a vet, right? Yeah, he's not even a medical doctor, but that kills me so much because he's just like, oh, okay, just a stack of cash. It's just like, and you can tell, like, in that moment, Chris is the only person he really cares about.
Mhm.
And even that, there's a limit on it because, he tells Chris, like, look, he's, all doped up on the painkillers or whatever. He's like, look, this is what we're doing. I'm going to meet you at Nate's at
Mhm.
whatever time it is. And if you're not there, I'm gone. And then when he eventually calls Nate and Nate's like, Chris is gone. He's like, what do you mean he's gone? Where'd he go? It's a
Mhm.
free country, brother.
Mhm.
And you can see, Neil is actually hurt by that. I don't know about hurt, but sort of surprised that Chris is
Surprised,
gone.
and he's surprised. He's worried about Chris because he knows that Chris has gone to try to find his wife,
Yes.
and there's that attachment that he's warned him against. So yeah,
But at the same time, as we've sort of mentioned, Neil doesn't follow his own rules. The
yeah,
famous,
100%.
if you spot the heat around the corner, you got to have nothing, no attachments, which he says at least twice in the movie. As soon as he meets Edie, like, no judgment, Amy Brenneman is probably going to keep a lot of people, in LA.
Mhm.
But he, very quickly becomes attached to her, and he turns on his sort of psychological tricks on her too. Once she realizes he's a criminal, he, in a scene or two, he brings her back in and convinces her, listen, let's go see these fluorescent jellyfish. And she's like, sure. It's kind of amazing. I mean, De Niro's charming, sure, but like, you just saw that, this guy massacred a bunch of people in downtown LA like 4 hours ago.
Yeah, but what else have you got?
Yeah, not the
Little
graphic design
Fortune?
business. Yeah, the CD design business not going that well.
2 CDs.
Yeah, some corporate letterhead,
Mhm.
not that exciting. Although she does seem to live in a nice house, but
Mhm.
up on a hill.
It's a good racket.
Yeah, it is. Meg, I wanted to ask you. Not everybody will know this, but Meg is a Jeopardy champion. People can look it up. It's a real thing.
Yes.
It is a real thing. Which of these characters do you think would have been the best Jeopardy contestant and then the worst? I've got my own answers, but I want to hear yours.
Which of the Heat characters would have been
Yeah.
the best Jeopardy contestants?
Yeah. Like, who's got some actual brain power and they could all do well under pressure.
Lauren would rule at Teen Jeopardy. And a stepdaughter, Natalie Portman's.
Natalie Portman.
I think, um, Chirito would flip over the podiums and charge at the host and try to strangle him. I think I could see Neil and Hannah and like they would always like go for broke on the Daily Doubles
Mm-hmm.
and the Final Jeopardy, and it would come down to the category for each of them.
Yeah. I could see Kelso doing pretty well.
Well,
I was
yeah,
gonna say, I
yeah.
was gonna say
Yeah.
Kelso, yeah.
The main group, yes,
Mhm.
I would agree. Kelso probably has the most actual knowledge of things.
I figure he's also probably like has an encyclopedic, understanding of classic jazz from the 20s, and so when that
Probably,
category comes
yes.
up,
Yeah. Weird insects, knowledge or something. Yeah. He's got a lot of time on his hands up there.
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't know yeah, Chirito would probably be the worst. He wouldn't, first thing that goes wrong, somebody's getting shot.
Right.
Or he
Yeah.
picks up the Jeopardy host and uses them as a human shield, maybe.
Sorry, Alex.
New category right now.
New category.
Oh man. Okay, probably last couple of things I wanted to get to. The ending of this movie is quite famous. Maybe not as famous as the diner scene, but it's up there. The shootout at LAX. One of the things that I learned in the commentary, Michael said that they shot that at LAX the same week that the Unabomber had made a threat against LAX, which tells you how long ago this was. The Unabomber, like, it's hard to even remember that was a thing. But I go back and forth on how I feel about the final scene of, Pacino grabbing De Niro's hand and that kind of thing. Most of the time I love it, like, because they sort of, as we mentioned earlier, see each other as mirror images, and they just recognize each other as kind of an equal in some ways. Sometimes I'll look at it and be like, damn, I wish he hadn't done that. But I wanted to see how you guys feel about it. What do you think, Meg?
I mean, whether Macaulay should have gotten away?
No. If there should have been like that last handshake at the end where Pacino is kind of holding De Niro's hand as he dies.
I
Like,
think I think that is important. Actually, they're the only two people in the world who understand each other and knew that this was perhaps inevitable. And that moment echoes a quick scene from the very start of the movie when Macaulay gets off the train and walks into the hospital. As he walks into the hospital, it's a Catholic hospital, and there's a statue out in front. It's a Pietà. It's the Virgin Mary with with Christ in her arms, and the scene at the end echoes back to that. But Hannah did what he thought he had to do, but he's not going to just let this guy go out stone cold. What about you?
You like it, Casey?
I do, honestly. And for the same reasons, like there's this sense of there's this kind of acknowledgement of a bond that they didn't really know they had, and that they kind of discover throughout the course of the movie. And this kind of sense of, I guess, respect that's conveyed there. I think the other thing that jumped out a little bit is just this theme of like isolation through the entire film with both of those characters. So this idea of like, no, I'm not going to let you die alone, and we're just going to have that. It's like, it's a shame that it had to play out this way, and you done screwed up and all that kind of stuff. But this idea of like acknowledging, I guess, some of the isolation that comes with Macaulay, with Pacino's character, with De Niro's character. Sorry. Pacino's character can empathize with that. So it's this idea of like, this is your final moment. I'm not gonna actually let you go through that alone, because I wouldn't want that to happen to me.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And also I think Pacino's characters, I think Hannah recognizes he won't go up against somebody like Macaulay again, probably.
Yeah.
Like, this is probably the apex predator that he'll ever see in his career. He's not a spring chicken. Like, he doesn't have 30 years left, and there probably aren't a lot of crews like Macaulay's crew. He mentions
that
early. Yeah.
there's clearly like a profound respect.
Yeah.
This idea of like, I don't like what you're doing, but man, you're really good at what you do.
Well, he says,
Right.
he thinks Macaulay's gotten away, and he says, "Bon voyage."
You were good.
You were
You
good.
were good. Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't talk about it, but the oil refinery scene where
Yeah.
Screw is good.
yeah,
We just got made.
yeah, the LAPD, us.
Police.
It's so good because the first time you see it, you have no idea what's happening. They're just looking around in circles. They can't figure out what Macaulay's crew was looking at, and then Pacino, it just sort of dawns on him. And I don't even think he sees
He
Macaulay
never sees
actually.
Macaulay up on
Right.
the-
But Macaulay kind of smiles, like as he's getting up with the camera, he kind of laughs and smiles to himself, like, "Yep, we are good."
Yeah. You can tell like that part where and yeah, he doesn't seem. He's like, I've got an idea.
What they're
When
looking at.
Hannah, wait a sec, I've got an idea. Like, oh, and then yeah, the way De Niro's character kind of he's doing this whole thing and making a bit of a show of it, and you see De Niro's character like, yep, I got you, and,
Yeah.
and you know it.
And that scene I noticed has become a meme when at least I'm an F1 fan, and
Yes.
when every time there's like a Red Bull does a 1.8 second pit stop, someone will post a meme. It's just Al Pacino looking up and it says, "This crew is good."
Yeah, exactly. And there's another quick scene with Nate and De Niro in the car where they're talking about Pacino, where he gives him the file on all of the cops that are after him.
Mhm.
And Nate says, my guy says that, Hannah really likes you, thinks you're a sharp guy. You do this sharp, you do that sharp. And De Niro kind of smiles
Mhm.
and
Funny
laughs.
like a heart
Yeah,
attack.
funny like a heart attack. And, Nate's kind of reminding him like, this shit isn't funny, man. This is serious. Like these
3
guys are coming.
marriages, yeah, 3 marriages.
Yeah.
He's out. Do you think he's one of those guys that sits at home? No, he's
No.
not out. He's out there hunting.
He's obsessed.
Mhm.
Yep. He's obsessed, which, again, Casey, is something we see in, both sides of kind of the cybercrime world. Like some of the
100%.
hunters themselves get completely sucked in and obsessed with like tracking down high-end crews, and those high-end crews, like that is their job, and they're making a crap load of money at it, and they're going to stay sharp.
Yeah, and to some degree, you kind of need that.
Yeah.
To be able to get it done. So there's that aspect of the character. I think I love that part about it because folks that do work this type of thing in the modern day, you do see them get pulled all the way into this stuff. Pretty much at the expense of everything else.
Yeah.
And there's oftentimes a trail of destruction around it, but they get the job done at the same time.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it becomes obsessive. Meg, we haven't talked, but there's been plenty of like casting rumors and things like that about Heat 2, the movie. I can't let you go without asking. I don't know if you have any information for me, but
Nothing I can tell you.
Damn it.
Nothing.
Oh well. I have seen some very encouraging casting. I mean, if they want to put Adam Driver in that movie, sign me up. Yeah.
I love Adam Driver, and have you seen Ferrari? He's phenomenal.
I have.
In that.
Yeah. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Amazing. Michael, please make Heat 2. Please start shooting. Please get it done. Please don't let it take 20 years the way that Heat took. And Meg, I know you have a new book coming out June 18th. Shadowheart?
Shadowheart, which is book 4 in my unsub series about an FBI profiler, Caitlin Henry, who hunts serial predators. And in this one, she's after 2 serial killers who are involved in some kind of competition.
Oh Lord.
Mysterious.
That'll be a
mysterious,
fun read.
A lot of fun. I loved writing it. It's got a ton of twists, and I hope people will enjoy it. It's out June 18th. You can pre-order it right now.
Yeah, go pre-order it. The series is really great. I'm rereading it from start to finish right now, just so I can be prepared going into it. Because like we were talking about earlier, I forget characters' names. Like you said, you forgot your own characters' names. It happens.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to see it. And thank you both so much for coming on, especially Meg. Meg, I know you're very busy in the promo schedule for the book and all that kind of stuff, but I really appreciate it.
This is so much fun. I really enjoyed it.
It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks again, Casey. And great to see you guys. I'll talk to you both soon.
Okay.
Cheers. Bye. Thanks.